Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to be reviewing the new Catrice x Eman collaboration. First of all, I just want to say congratulations to Catrice and Eman. I think Eman did an amazing job picking out all of the shades in this collaboration. All three palettes I personally really love. I have played around with all three of them and I'm just going to give you my thoughts on what I think about them, some swatches, and a tutorial. So I purchased all three palettes on the Ulta website. Each of the palettes retail for $11.99, which I think is a pretty reasonable price. So if you end up picking up all three palettes, you are looking to pay about $36. I love that there's a variety of lighter and deeper shades that I really think will work on the majority of skin tones. So even if some of the shades in the highlighter palette or the blush palette don't work for you, you can always use them as eyeshadows, or you can mix and match them. That's what I ended up doing. So besides the fact that I love the formula and the shades of all three palettes, I absolutely love the design. I really love how sleek and compact the palettes are, and they do each have a mirror, which is really handy. I also love how each palette is a different shade. The Bronzed AF eyeshadow palette is more of a beigey color. The highlighter palette is more of an off-white color, and then the blush palette is a pinky color. So I really like that because after using all three palettes, I found myself knowing right away which palette was which without even having to read the packaging. So starting off with the eyeshadow palette, this is the Bronzed AF eyeshadow palette. I absolutely loved the formula of this palette. I had never tried any powder products from Catrice, so I was really excited to see how these performed, and they did perform extremely well. And is it just me, or does this palette remind you of the Soft Blend palette from Anastasia? To me it does, but I love that about this palette. So here are both of the palettes. I'm going to try my best to hold both of them up. Yeah, I think they look very, very similar. Of course, you're not getting every single shade from the Soft Blend palette in the Catrice one, but if you're on a budget or you just don't want to spend that much money on an eyeshadow palette, I would say definitely go for the Catrice one because it performs extremely well. They're all very easy to blend and you can build them up even though they are pigmented right away. Even the black shade in the palette called Mulholland Drive, this one right here, that one was pretty pigmented right away and I was able to build it up. That's what I have smudged on my upper lash line. So the Bronzed AF eyeshadow palette, highly recommend. This is probably my favorite palette out of the collection. Next we have the Cheeky blush palette, and this one again, very pretty packaging. In this one you're getting 4 blush shades. When I first saw this blush palette on the Ulta website, I wasn't really sure if I would pick it up or not, just because the blush shades do look pretty intimidating, at least to me. I don't normally go for blush shades this bright or intense. The shades in this blush palette I think are more suited to a medium tan to deeper skin tone. For this look, I applied the shade Cairo, which is the more bronzy shade in the palette. And then I topped it with a tiny bit of this shade called Luxor. That shade was very intimidating to me, probably the most intimidating shade in the entire palette. Looking at the palette, it does look like a straight up just orange shade that I thought I wasn't going to be able to use at all. But I did tap my brush into it just once and really tapped it off, and then I applied that right over top of Cairo, and I feel like I made it work. Of course, I had to tone it down with a little bit of translucent powder and a brush. I haven't actually played around with the other 2 shades in the palette, but I can see myself reaching for them. Both of the blushes that I applied today did blend very, very well, even though they were super pigmented. So I do recommend this blush palette if you have a medium tan or deeper skin tone. I think these will be perfect for you. But if you have a lighter or fair skin tone, you might have a little bit of trouble with them. So the blush palette I do really like. Maybe not something I'll reach for on a regular basis, but they do work for me. So these ones I also recommend. And finally, we have the Lit Highlighter Palette. I had no idea what to expect from, any of the palettes because like I said, I had never tried any powder products from Catrice, but the highlighter palette really did surprise me. These are just so beautiful on the skin. I'm wearing a mix of Surrey and Victoria on the high points of my face. This one is probably my second favorite palette out of all three. I just really love the formula on these highlighters. They're very glossy, not really shimmery. I love how you can mix and match all of the shades depending on your skin tone. I have yet to try the shade Whistler, which is more of it's a gold shade, but it has a little bit of like a greenish gold tint to it. Victoria does lean a little bit too deep on me, but I did apply just a tiny amount of that, and then I went over top of that with the shade Surrey. I do have a lot of highlighters in my collection, so it's really hard for me to be impressed by highlighters nowadays, just because I've tried so many different formulas and shades, but this highlighter formula really did surprise me. So I do definitely see myself reaching for this highlighter palette on a regular basis. That's it for the review of the palettes. Now let's jump into the tutorial. I decided to start off with the eyes just in case I had any fallout. I prepped my lids with the Catrice Liquid Camouflage Concealer in the shade Light Beige, and then I took the shade Fairfax and set from the brow bone down to the crease. Next, I took the shade Sunset on a Morphe JH32 brush. I started with this shade on the outer corners of the lid and then blended it into the crease, and I just took my time to really build up that shade to get the intensity that I wanted. To deepen up the outer corners, I took the shade Runyon on a Morphe M433 brush, and I really packed on that shade right on the outer corners, sort of dragging it onto the upper lash line, and I did take it also into the crease once I didn't have as much product on the brush. I took a little bit more of that shade Sunset just to connect those two shades. To deepen up the outer corners even more, I took the shade Sweetser on a Morphe JH33 brush, and I kept this shade right on the outer corners of the lid. I didn't bring it into the crease like I did with the shade Runyon. Next, I applied the shade Malibu all over the lid using my finger, but I wanted to see if I could intensify the shade a bit more, so I also went ahead and dipped into the shade again and wet my brush with the Milani setting spray, and it did kind of intensify it, but it wasn't anything too dramatic. To blend out any harsh edges, I took that Morphe JH32 brush with no additional product, and then I also cleaned up underneath my eyes and sharpened up the edges with a makeup remover wipe. Then I took the shade Mullihan Drive on a Dose of Colors dual-ended eyeshadow brush, and I just smudged that right along my upper lash line. I wanted to create a really soft sort of smoky wing, but I didn't completely wing it out. It just gives kind of like the illusion of having a wing, but it's super soft and smoky, of course. I decided to take a little bit of the shade Hollywood Boulevard and focus it right on the inner portion of the lid. I didn't completely cover up the Malibu shade that I already had, but I just wanted to add a little bit more of a gold sheen to it. Moving on to the face, I'm going to probably speed up this part just so that I can focus more on the Catrice x Eman Collaboration, but I did apply my foundation, concealer, powder, and bronzer. I will leave everything that I used in the description box below in case you're interested.
Moving back to the eyes, I took the shade Sunset on a Morphe 139 brush and I blended that right along my lower lash line. And then I also took the shade Runyon on a Sigma E30 pencil brush, smudging it along my lower lash line and then also connecting it right onto the outer corners of the lid. I took just a tiny bit of the shade Sweetser on that Dose of Colors brush and I focused that right on the outer corners of the lower lash line, connecting it also onto the outer corner of the lid. And then I took the shade Laguna on that same brush and then I smudged it out with the Morphe M139 brush with no additional product. I didn't apply any falsies, so I layered a couple of mascaras, the Flower Beauty Warrior Princess mascara and the Lancome Monsieur Big, and then I tightlined with the Lottie London AM to PM Kohl pencil in the shade Mocha, and I also lined my waterline with the Colourpop eyeliner in the shade Overboard. Moving back to the face, I took the shade Cairo from the blush palette, and I started off by lightly building it up, just so that I didn't get too much pigment right away. And then I decided to top it with a tiny bit of the shade Luxor, which is super, super pigmented. Just go in with a very light hand if you do have a lighter skin tone. The good thing is that these blushes are super blendable, so I didn't have too much of a problem toning them down. But I did take a little bit of translucent powder and just blend it around the edges just to tone it down even more. Next, dipping into the highlighter palette, I took the shade Victoria and applied that to the high points of the face, and I felt like it was almost a little bit too deep on me just on its own, so I did top it off with the shade Surrey, and I absolutely love the way that these two shades mix together. I can't wait to try out the shade Whistler. I just felt like it wouldn't go with this look, but this is such a beautiful highlighter palette. I can't recommend it enough, honestly. And then I also applied that shade Surrey right on the inner corners of the eyes. And then finally for lips, I took the LA Girl Auto Lip Liner in the shade Keep It Spicy and just sort of overdrew my lips. And I forgot to show a clip of this, but I did fill in my lips with the liquid lipstick from Dose of Colors in the shade Cork.
I really love the way this look turned out, and of course I love all three of the palettes. I highly recommend all three of them, but especially the eyeshadow palette and the highlighter palette. Those were just the two standout palettes in my opinion. So yeah, that's it for today. I will see you in my next video. Bye!